following definitions of a hero. And today I'm going to tell you about a person that I think is a hero. Now, according to dictionary.com, a hero is a person who can do courageous abilities and see the face of fear and not flinch, basically. I'm going to talk today about General Hal Moore and his accomplishments through World War II in Korea, Vietnam, and post-Vietnam. Starting off with World War II, he graduated as a cadet and second lieutenant from West Point Academy. He was then stationed in Japan, where he fought on the Pacific Front until 1948. In 1948 to the mid-1950s, his involvement with the Korean War took place at Fort Bragg, where he tested experimental parachutes. Now, not everything was smooth sailing with the experimental parachutes. On one of his first jumps, he ended up getting stuck on the back of his drop plane, which was a C-46 airplane moving at 110 miles per hour, 1,500 feet above the ground. Now, most people cannot put two thoughts together whenever they're being drugged at these intense conditions, but he managed to cut himself free and land safely to the ground on his reserve chute. He had a few more incidents, but that was his most severe one, according to his interview with Croyson, who was a general for Armchair General. Moving on to more of his Vietnam points. He became a lieutenant colonel at that point and was moved to Fort Benning, Georgia. He was then put in charge of the 1st Cavalry Division, which was almost another experimental group of Bell UH-1 Iroquois helicopters, and we know those as the Hueys today. The entire point of this division was to test out these new battle machines' abilities, which were to provide transport and offensive and defensive capabilities to aid ground forces. So he went into Vietnam in 1965 and fought and won the very first battles, which was in La Drang Valley. The enemies, which at the time were North Koreans, were entrenched in a mountain above the location. All their landing zones that they were brought in on were soon overrun, and all their own front lines and everything was in disarray within 3 days. The entire battle lasted 5 days, and because more North Vietnamese died in that battle than Americans, and we managed to kind of take the position, it was considered an American victory and much needed at the point. But in the end, it really wasn't much of a victory because we lost so many people and yet did not keep the position. We left the area as soon as the entire battle was done, according to Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore at the time in an interview with Sobel from USA News. At that point, he moved into more of a civilian life job, and this was after Vietnam, after all of his escapades were done. He assumed the role of a father in a normal civilian homestead, and then did professor jobs at West Point Academy, to where he trained another general who is quite famous, named General Schwarzkopf, Norman Schwarzkopf of Desert Storm. And this particular cadet at the time said he was his Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, or now at the time Lieutenant General, was his biggest influence into everything that he did as a soldier and everything that he did in his career as a man. He always encouraged his cadets, according to this interview as well with Sobel, that always read up on your military history and always read about small unit tactics, because usually it was the small units that decided the entire fate of a battle. He then moved in 1990s to South Carolina, where he lived out for what is now he's still alive, but basically where he's at now. And since 1990, he has visited Vietnam along with several of the other Viet Cong and North Vietnamese generals at the time of that same battlefield in honor of his troopers. One of the journalists that was stationed with his battalion at the time, James Galloway, also did several interviews with him in which I'm taking some of this information from. He wrote a book also on these achievements, and the book was titled "We Were Soldiers Once and Young." And in it, it just describes all the basic happenings in more detail of these 5 days of hell that they all went through. Later on, the book was then published into a movie with Galloway as one of the screenwriters for it. And as you can imagine, the title was "We Were Soldiers," and Mel Gibson played as General Hal Moore. Now, to this day, he always wishes it was himself that had gone instead of his men. He always questioned, why wasn't it me and not them? But even though he lost all of these soldiers, he still boasts about one fact, and it is quite a very proud one, considering most military people. He has never left one soldier behind, dead or wounded or missing, in all of his time as a commanding officer or any of his career in the military. He made sure all of his men got home, even if they were dead. And to me, that is the quality of a true hero, always looking out for people other than yourself. So, basically, through Korea and World War II and Vietnam, this man has learned the greatest act of kindness, which is to allow forgiveness and go back and lead and face everything that you ever feared for something that you love so much.